Welcome back to the Coachable Players Podcast. I'm your host, John O'Brien, and on this podcast, we explore a simple belief. The most successful athletes, employees, business leaders, and coaches all share a common trait. They are coachable. Today's episode is called Coachability Built This. Our guest is one of Pennsylvania's most respected construction executives. He grew up playing youth sports, excelled in high school playing sports, and played some at Bloomsburg University too. And eventually he went on to help lead his family's construction company, a company that has been building America since 1882. And of course, I'm talking about Noble Bud Quandel, the top executive at Quandel Enterprises. When Bud started at Quandel in the late 70s, they were not a large, powerful company that you see today. Far from it. Before we jump into the coachability conversation, I'd like listeners to hear this. I think it's an incredible story of growth at Quandel Enterprises. When Bud joined in the late 70s, the company was generating around $1 million in revenue. And if I'm off on that, I'm sure Bud will correct me. But today, that same company is around close to $500 million annually and is recognized as one of the top premier construction firms in Pennsylvania. What's fascinating is that if you ask most successful leaders how they achieve success, they rarely start by talking about themselves. They talk about the coaches, mentors, teammates, coworkers, employees, all the people that help them along the way. Today's conversation is about coachability. It's about leadership. It's about culture. It's about building great teams and surrounding yourself with people who challenge you to become better. So let's get started. Welcome to the show, Bud Quandel. How are we doing today, sir?
We're doing very well, John. Thank you. Pleased
Awesome.
to be here. For having.
You bet. I know it's been probably close to a year. We've been talking about this interview, and we finally got a date on the calendar, so I'm excited. Let's start right with the early years and talk about sports. Let's hear the Bud story right from the beginning. What sports did you play growing up, and what role did athletics help in shaping who you are today?
Well, certainly athletics, I think, played a huge role in my development, and every bit as much as education, and learned a lot of lessons from the very beginning. And one of them I can recall here in my hometown of Minersville, Pennsylvania. I tried out in second grade, the summer after second grade, for Little League Baseball, and the tryouts were right here on this block. There's a pretty big lot next to the football field, and that's where our tryouts were. So I went out for Little League, and lo and behold, I didn't make the team, and I was crushed. And I remember going home, and it was one of my first experiences at really losing something. And I remember how my parents had to bolster me, convince me that next year we can try again, dust myself off, and practice, and things will change. So I went back the following year and got picked to a different team, and started. I made the team this year.
Awesome.
And it was summer after third grade. I was 8 years old, going on 9, and I sat on the bench for a year. And the following year, I started to get some play when our team would get ahead. So I really learned that this was equal to my performance, and it was competitive, and that if I worked at it and had the discipline to continue to practice, this would all come around, and eventually it did.
And then you moved on to the high school. You excelled in what sort of sports did you play in high school?
And then in Minersville, back these days, a very good uh, athletic program, specific, particularly football, and it was it was never an option whether I would play football. It was a given, and we had to my it was the good fortune of having an incredibly uh, good coach back then, and he was totally dedicated to his players, and um, and that was an incredibly valuable lesson in life as far as delayed gratification, and um, and he treated every player like they were somebody special. He recruited, and it was just a wonderful program. And then and his practices were brutal. And this I mean, we would have to be in summer prep August 18th. We had to prepare for that, and if you didn't go out a month ahead of time and start getting yourself in shape, um, people paid a price for that because his practice sessions were like 4 hours.
Oh,
I
geez.
remember one time uh, being on the field. I think it was sophomore junior year, and it was like 1:45 on a summer day, and we started at like 8:15, and we were still on the field, and he was uh, he had a pretty good. He was a line coach, but he was also he was our head coach, but he was a lineman, I should say.
Hmm.
And he went to the University of Pennsylvania back in those days where people like Chuck Bednarik, some people may not know who he was, but he was one of the stars of the Philadelphia Eagles back in the days when they were in the 60s. But this coach was his name was John Gursky, and he came from Shamokin, Cole Township area, and he was just known for um, the basics and line drills, and he worked what we didn't have in talent, we got through discipline and hard work and delayed gratification.
Awesome.
And then in basketball, that was another thing. I had the very good fortune of a coach that came to my high school in my freshman year. And Minersville had always had decent players, but they never really had the coaches. The coaching that we had was almost some of the teachers would do it by default. So we had a coach, but they weren't they did it for this because they're dedicated to the school rather than really being good basketball coaches. Yeah. This guy was the real deal. He was older. He was maybe 60 years old, and his name was Thomas Fitzpatrick. And everywhere he was prior to coming back to this was his home area, he had champions, no accident. And I got to tell this story. I mentioned it to John one time before. If anyone ever saw the movie Hoosiers, where Gene Hackman came to this school in Indiana, small school in Indiana, that movie brought back so many memories that reminded me of this in basketball. And we couldn't scrimmage. And after having a grueling football season, we wanted to get to play basketball inside and had the comfort of a gym instead of freezing our asses off outside in late November, December. And he made us do these drills, weaves, and PT prep. And it was, you read about John Wooten when he went to I think UCLA, and he had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and those players, he made them. He actually taught them how to put their socks on, so that they didn't have creases, which would give them blisters. And his whole point to all this was that they needed to understand that the details and the basics are important. Well, this coach we had was the same way, and he, we had to do calisthenics and running. I would think for the first hour, and he wouldn't let us scrimmage for like 2 weeks. And he had these rules, like before you left the court, you had to shoot 50 foul shots, and you could not leave practice until you shot your 50 foul shots. And there was, it was incredible. And we came back, and out of my time in high school, we took 3 out of 4 championships on a county level. And in my senior year, we were in the district. We played the District 11 state playoffs. And the team that beat us went to the quarterfinals.
Awesome.
So, I mean, it was discipline. Everything he did was discipline and structure.
Very cool. Well, so you had some good coaches in high school, and it sounds like they were able to drive you to success and make you a better person, a better athlete. Yeah, but looking back, what lessons from sports still influence you, how you lead people today? Any sort of lessons out there?
Well, I think the biggest lesson is delayed gratification and discipline, and teamwork creates a synergy that's 2 plus 2 equals 5, and if you're lucky, maybe 6. And if you're prepared for this, I think if you really work this in your life, I think it's a secret to success. I think it requires self-reflection to do it correctly, self-awareness, and humility is one way to be self-aware. Yep. I think that's huge. And whether you're in business or anything else, and if you read the book Good to Great, there's humility is mentioned throughout that book by Jim Collins, that the most successful companies are they focus on what they really do well, get a team together that can work together and recognize their strengths and weaknesses, and then deal with their weaknesses, work together, and stay humble. And it's because when you start having success, I think it's human nature to start becoming overconfident, and in some cases worse. Yep. And that's when I think in any business or in anything in life, when you're not self-aware and you lose the humility that gives you self-awareness, I think it leads to huge problems. But the teamwork is essential, and I think that that helped me in building an organization here. I mean, I've looked at it as any organization can only get lifted as high as the components of its team will lift the leadership. It's up to the leadership to provide the opportunity, the incentives to, engage people and secure their commitment, and that's huge. Mm-hmm. All of these things were things that I witnessed in winning with athletics, and yes, education was an important component. Especially I had high school teachers, and at that time, all of our coaches were, nothing against coaches who are not teachers, but that's the way it was back then. Yeah. But I had some good teachers and good mentors, and my parents always had a strong. My mom was a teacher, and she was also um, a female athlete, and my father was also. So it was, I think, um, building an organization is like anything else. It's just a matter of scale
Yep.
and what size you're going to be, but it's still all these components. None of that changes.
Agree. So we got a nice foundation of who Bud is, from the early years and how sports played such an impactful role in your development and your leadership style. But now let's jump to you entering the family business. Your family company dates back to 1882. So I mean, obviously you grew up, being associated and being around the family company. But what was it like officially joining the company, after college? And then what were
Well,
some of like the biggest challenges in those early years?
there was several families involved. My uncle was involved in the family business. My father was involved in the business, and my grandfather had them involved in the family business. I don't have much documentation on my great grandparents who founded this in 1882, other than they started as a lime kiln. They call it slacking lime. They made lime,
Mhm.
and that was a pretty tough business. My grandfather got into that, and somewhere when he was very young. He didn't have any college education, though I've read about him some very interesting stories that he was such a hard worker and he was a learner and studied what he didn't know. He went and found out. That's another issue that I think is necessary for success, and that's intellectual curiosity is absolutely necessary. Self-awareness, and you start looking and saying, well, what do I need to do here? Where do I want to go? What do I want to be? So he was in this business, and he started with this selling lime and plaster. And then at that time, they went from horsehair, which was what they used to plaster on, to wood lath. And he started selling accessories to the lime product and got into lumber. And back in those days, most lumber companies became construction companies.
Hmm.
And it was not unusual for that. And he had a couple hundred employees
Oh wow.
at course that was at the turn of the century, coming into the 1900s. And coal was uh, huge here, and there was all kinds of opportunities, and he took advantage of that and sold both building supplies and construction services to these big coal companies, including the Reading Company, which was developed into the Reading Railroad. That had a big presence up here and owned like 50,000 acres of ground, big coal operations, and they used to ship it down to Philadelphia by rail. So he not only had was educated himself to grow and scale the business up, but I read an obituary. Okay, it was in a business publication after he passed away. I read this article about him that described him. And this was in the days like he died in 1937. That he was very well known for his upright business dealings and his discipline. And I think that became that struck me. My
Yeah.
father always was an honorable gentleman also. And my dad went to college. He went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute and graduated in architecture. So it was just a natural for him to be in the construction business because he was technically brilliant. And then they scaled up the lime and building supplies into ready mix concrete, and in the early 1940s. And my uncle and my dad started two cousins and I in doing work in the family business at like 13, 14 years old, where we had to engage, and they gave us everything from sweeping the warehouse to in high school loading cement, which was loading bags of cement, which I remember were 93.2 or 93.5 pounds each. So that was good for physical fitness and, and dovetailed into our sports.
Yeah.
So my cousin and I, that's Greg's father, who Greg is now my successor at Quandel Enterprises.
Yep.
Greg's father. They had all of us working, my dad and him, in the family business, and we knew pretty much everything from the manual labor work right through to doing chores, sweeping warehouses, driving nails, and working as carpenter helpers and carpenter apprentices at one point. And it was a real experience. We started every one of us from the ground up. And my first cousin Jim went into the ready mix business full time. He passed away earlier this year in February. My cousin Charles became an engineer and was a graduate of the Naval Academy, and then worked in the precast business and started his own engineering firm. And then he and I started I started as a partner with him in 2006. We created an engineering firm to do high inner city rail and light rail, and accelerated light rail. And he's based in Chicago. But all of us had to start here, and that gave us a work ethic and a discipline and the family history that has been treasured by us, and we make a big deal out of the heritage being based on discipline and doing the right thing and functioning the business with. Yep. And we have a saying: integrity always, and that's one of our rules for being here.
So the company has seen a lot of growth, as I mentioned early on to kick off the show, from $1 million when you first started to getting close to 500 million. Were there any key decisions or key stories about that helped that growth, or anything to point out to get to that level? Any leadership tactics?
In scaling up a company, it requires thought and planning. It's not just going out and working hard. You've got to have a vision first for your company, and what do you want to be? What do you want to do? And how are you going to get there? And then you got to create. You need to create a roadmap for that vision to fulfill it. And that roadmap you need to anticipate the obstacles, and you will never anticipate all of them, but you can anticipate. If you're educated in the business, you can anticipate, what's going to happen and how we're going to prevent this. And that's basically comes down to risk analysis. So you need to anticipate risk, and you will never get all of it, but you got to deal with it and manage it when it comes up. And just about the time you think you have everything nailed, something will always happen. Something will come up that will cause you a problem. It's just the nature of life. But and you got to question when you're taking steps. What are you doing after you get a process established? You're going to do. You have to get foundations in before you can erect steel. And if you can't get the foundations done, you can't erect the steel. Once the steel's up, you got to put a roof on it. But they have to be scheduled. You don't wait your steel is up to get your roofer to come in and say, start. So there's sequences that need to be followed in this business, and they need to be planned out. And to have everyone do that appropriately and in an ideal world, it's the same way on every job, without getting it's controlling without being a bureaucracy, and keeping a sense of this is where we're going, and we have to get done. And we need to anticipate the weather.
Yep.
But we still, when we commit to a date, we need to get it done by that date.
Yep.
In the perfect world, there will be obstacles, and they need to be managed. So I think eliminating the obstacles is there's all kinds of books out on that. The first one I read years ago was called The Goal, written by a gentleman by the name of Goldratt. And it was basically, no matter what you're doing, you look for where the choke points are. If you're driving down an interstate and there's 2 lanes converging to one, you'll find traffic backed up sometimes miles. And that's because it's a constraint. And you have the same thing when you're building a building, or wherever you're building, there's a constraint. So you got to anticipate them and eliminate them, or be prepared to deal with them. And if you do that, I mean, you read about, there's a gentleman who has a book out right now called The Algorithm. His name is John McNeil, and he was one of Elon Musk's star players. And he talks about this very same subject, that you look at what you're doing, and then you have to ask the question, how can we do it better? Because you're doing it a certain way, and even there's a prescribed way to do it in the industry, but that way may become, especially with the coming of AI and all the other technology, productivity enhancement tools that we have. I think it's important that you start questioning, well, do we really need to do this, or how can we do it better? And that's literally the success that Musk has had. I mean, who would ever have thought 15, 20 years ago you could land a rocket boost backwards onto a landing pad?
Crazy.
I mean, it's mind-blowing, but it's possible.
Yeah.
And I think with what we have today, I think that's the secret is to always be, I made the statement earlier, intellectual curiosity. It's one of those things that you need to be focused on. And that same issue ties into self-awareness too, I think, and that say, okay, we know what we're doing, but maybe we can do it better.
Yeah.
And if so, how? And question that.
Yeah. So I've known you for maybe 20 years prior to KCA, part of the statewide organization we work together with. And over that time, you talk a lot about the smart people that you employ, the smart people at Quandel, and the talented people that you have, like-minded people like you that look for growth and look for obstacles and are like-minded like you, coachable. Are there certain qualities that you see when hiring people and future leaders?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the first one, I'll come back to it, is intellectual curiosity. And I think there's usually 4 things that we look for, and that's one. Someone has to be willing to learn and continue to learn. And here I am at the autumn of my career. I'm working my way out. I'm still involved, but nowhere near Craig is doing an incredibly great job, and his leadership team. So the intellectual curiosity is, and the ability to continue learning is absolutely key. The second one would be um, uh, having insight into things, being insightful, and that you want someone that can so-called, I've heard it described as looking around the corners of life, being able to think around what the corners of, when you go around a corner in life, what might be there. I heard Pete Hegseth say that somewhere in an interview, and that stuck with me. That was that description of that. The third is the ability to engage with people, and I think engagement is being able to have fulfilling communications, and that would be something like I think really what I view it as being able to understand a situation. I always equate that to say I try to discipline myself. I sometimes have problems doing it, but listen. And this comes in. Stephen Covey has 7. I think he has a book out, The 7 Principles of Highly Effective People. And one of the things he talks about is understand before trying to be understood. So I would say listen to understand the situation clearly before being compelled to communicating your opinion on something. I think listen to understand before communicating to be understood. That's the third one. And the last one would be fortitude. And that's not just, like they say, intestinal fortitude. That's being able to be persistent enough and determined enough to focus on what you're trying to accomplish and don't give up. Never lose sight of your vision if you want to go somewhere. I think that the fortitude to stay focused on having the courage to stay in the game. Because there's going to be setbacks, and again, you got to dust yourself off and go back in the game and play it to win.
Yeah.
And subject to the right rules.
Yeah.
But I think that those are issues. I think that are if you think about it, there's some other things that add to that, but if you want to break it down into some basics, I think that's a pretty good.
Yeah. Awesome list. So we started the conversation talking about sports, and you played on some awesome teams growing up, and we're talking now about the growth of Quandel, an awesome company. What similarities do you see between successful sports teams and successful construction companies?
Well, I think anyone who's been in sports, yourself included, I know you have. If I'm not mistaken, you were a quarterback on a state championship football
Not state
team.
championship. No. I wish we won the state championship.
Well, you guys had I think you came from a very good sports background, but I think having the ability to have a team that has the wisdom, and that's a wisdom. I'm talking is different than intellect. Being smart's one thing. I know a lot of very smart, high IQ people, but they don't have a lot of wisdom.
Yeah.
But wisdom is something that where you keep those qualities that I was talking about in balance. They got to be self-aware. They gotta be humble. And if they are, and you can be humble and be confident. It's where you get supremely confident or arrogant that it starts running into problems, and that's where teamwork gets disrupted by that type of behavior. So I think it's important to keep that um, uh, those things in focus, and they all constitute the same characteristics that a winning team would have.
Hmm.
And if there's a leader, uh, let have the leader lead. And if the leader is good, he'll be watching his people to see who needs a pat on the back and who needs to, if they're becoming unself-aware of something, how they can go and correct that without uh, destroying the person's drive.
Yeah.
And you know, a good coach, anyone that has a good coach, the coach can get you aside and give you corrective measures to take and work with you. And sometimes they need to be in your face. It just depends on the situation. That's a last resort.
Hmm.
But I think it's important to treat people with respect and respect their dignity. I think that all those, um, uh, and some of it. I mean, we're dressed casual, and where I came from in high school, they got into this thing where when we would go like on away games, maybe you guys did this, I'm not sure, but we couldn't talk on a bus. We couldn't talk. We have to be. They'd say everybody'd be like, keep it down. We need to be focused on winning this
Yeah.
game. And we had it, and in basketball, we had to wear sport coats.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, our coach was one of those guys. If somebody didn't have the money for it, he'd get one for them.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was crazy, but
Yeah.
it was. There was lessons to be learned by all this when I think back on it. When we got out, we had a tough. We came from this tough Coleridge in town. We get out of a bus going somewhere in a away game with sport coats and a tie on
Yeah.
for a basketball game. It was crazy,
Yeah.
but there was messages instilled
Hmm.
in us doing that.
Yeah. Dress the part. You're important. You got to look important. So yeah. So do you have time for one more question here?
Sure.
Yeah. So this has been an awesome conversation here. But when people look at your career, what do you hope they remember the most? Bud Quandel grew a company to extreme growth here with a great team. What do you want them to remember the most?
Um, I think it's supremely important to be remembered for me. I think as a person who respected uh, people, treated people um, properly, and was uh, a person of integrity and someone who was well intentioned and kind to other people, to his fellow human beings, because I think that's important. And while sometimes we may accidentally offend someone, but it's not intentional. I think um, it's important to treat others the way you want to be treated. It's biblical
Hmm.
and it's important. And I think if you can accomplish that, and thank God for our founding fathers, we were given a country that allow us to fulfill our visions for our lives, and they turn into opportunities. We have the greatest nation in the history
Yeah.
of civilization.
Agree. And I love how you started out by respect for others and respecting the team, and it's a strong culture you have there. You know, success isn't built by one person, it's built by people who are willing to learn, willing to adapt, willing to accept coaching, and willing to help others along the way. Mr. Bud Quandel, thank you for joining us on the Coachable Players. This has been an
Like
awesome conversation. Thank you. Until next time, stay hungry, stay humble, and stay coachable. Thank you, Bud.